So the man who many saw as, well, the face of the deep state, he's now facing two criminal charges.
That's right, James Comey.
And it's causing quite a stir, sparking this huge debate about whether it's, long overdue justice or maybe just political payback.
A really intense reaction, yeah.
Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Our mission today, well, it's to unpack the source material you shared with us about this indictment of former FBI Director James Comey.
The charges are making false statements and obstruction of justice. Serious stuff.
Definitely. And the sources we're looking at, they don't just treat this as like another legal case. They frame it as a really critical moment.
A moment focused on accountability, specifically for alleged political bias way up high in the Justice Department.
And you can imagine for people who've argued for years that the system was weaponized against President Trump, this feels like real vindication.
Offensive, finally, perhaps.
Exactly. We saw Kash Patel, who the sources mention as the current FBI director. He called the backlash to the indictment hypocrisy on steroids.
Strong words.
Yeah, and he insisted this investigation was actually led impartially, by career agents, just following the evidence where it led. Now, what's really crucial to get here is the specific law they're using against Comey. It's 18 U.S.C. 1001A2.
Right, the federal false statement statute.
Basically, it makes it a crime to knowingly lie to the government. People sometimes call it the perjury trap law because intent is key. You have to prove they meant to deceive.
Intent is always the hard part to prove in these cases.
And here's the twist, the part that really dominates the discussion, especially on the right. Comey is facing the exact same charge.
The 1001 charge.
That he himself used against Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor. And remember, Comey kind of bragged about how he maneuvered to get Flynn charged.
He did describe that interaction in detail, yeah.
So that history, that specific parallel is why you hear this narrative of, like, poetic justice or the universe balancing the scales.
That history absolutely sets the stage, politically and emotionally. But if we drill down into the actual legal case, the core argument against Comey is, well, pretty straightforward on its face.
Which is?
Proving he lied under oath, specifically during congressional testimony back in 2020.
Okay, and what did he supposedly lie about then?
Well, he reaffirmed with something he'd said earlier back in 2017. He denied that he had ever disclosed or even okayed someone else disclosing sensitive FBI information to the media.
About the Trump or Clinton investigation.
Exactly. And prosecutors are now saying that denial under oath in 2020 was flat out false.
Okay, so what specific leak are they pointing to? Because, let's be honest, leaks in Washington are hardly rare. For an indictment like this, it must be pretty significant.
It really is, both politically and procedurally. The claim is that Comey allegedly authorized a leak about an FBI probe into the Clinton family's foundation.
The Clinton Foundation, when was this?
This information apparently ended up in a Wall Street Journal report in October 2016.
Wow, right before the election.
Right. So the critical question becomes, did Comey let sensitive FBI information out specifically to influence things right before people voted? And the whole case, legally speaking, under 18 U.S.C. 1001, it really hinges on who you believe. It's a classic he said scenario, but with high stakes.
So Comey denies it.
He denies authorizing that disclosure, yes. But then you have two key former colleagues, people who worked very closely with him, telling investigators a very different story.
Okay, who are they and what exactly did they claim? This sounds like the absolute core of the legal fight.
It really is. First, you have Andrew McCabe, the former deputy director.
McCabe, right.
He testified that Comey personally instructed him to provide information to the reporter. And McCabe admitted he was, in fact, a source for that specific Wall Street Journal story.
So McCabe puts it directly on Comey.
Directly. And then you also have James Baker, who was the FBI's general counsel at the time.
The pop lawyer.
Exactly. Baker told investigators he was, and I'm quoting here, under the belief he was ultimately instructed and authorized by Comey to give information to the media.
So McCabe says Comey directed him, and Baker believed he was authorized by Comey. That sounds, well, pretty damaging.
It's certainly powerful testimony. But again, the legal challenge is proving intent beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecution has to convince a jury not just that Comey's denial in 2020 was factually wrong, but that he knew it was wrong when he said it and intended to mislead Congress.
So they're relying heavily on McCabe and Baker's accounts to establish that Comey wasn't just mistaken or misremembering, but deliberately lying.
That's the crux of it, yes. Proving that specific intent based on the weight of their testimony versus Comey's denial.
Okay, so that's the tight legal box. But as you said, the sources really emphasize this isn't just about a leak investigation. It's framed as something much bigger.
Absolutely. It's fundamentally about addressing what supporters see as deep-seated institutional bias.
And that brings us straight to the Durham report, doesn't it?
It does. Connecting the dots, supporters see Comey's indictment as, well, a necessary first step, maybe, in acting on the findings of the Durham report.
Because they view Comey as, what, the main architect?
The central villain,
Yeah.
as some sources put it.
Mm-hmm.
The architect of the whole Russia investigation, crossfire hurricane, that casts such a long shadow over the Trump presidency. This indictment is seen as pushing back against that, against the so-called deep state. The charges are seen really as the first concrete legal consequence stemming from the Durham report's conclusions. Remember, Durham concluded that senior FBI leaders showed, and this is his wording, corrupt and depraved leftist political bias.
Wow. Okay, so let's get specific about what Durham found, because the details of how this bias supposedly showed up are important, right?
Yeah.
How did the FBI handle the Trump versus the Clinton investigations differently, according to the report?
Well, the contrast laid out in the sources based on Durham is pretty stark. The investigation into the Trump campaign, crossfire hurricane,
Yeah.
it was launched immediately as a full investigation.
Okay, a full investigation. Why is that distinction important for listeners? What does that mean compared to, say, something else?
It's crucial because it determines the tools investigators can use, how intrusive they can be. FBI policy, according to the sources citing Durham, generally required starting smaller, maybe with a preliminary assessment, unless there was really solid verified evidence to justify jumping straight to a full probe.
So the argument is they skipped the initial steps.
Correct. By going straight to a full investigation based on what Durham called unvetted hearsay information, they essentially bypassed internal checks and balances and unleashed the most powerful investigative techniques against a presidential campaign right away. Now, you compare that process to how the FBI handled the investigation into the Clinton Foundation.
Okay, what did Durham say about that one?
The report details how that investigation was effectively slow-walked. Senior FBI officials apparently put restrictions on the agents involved.
Restrictions. Leading to what?
Leading to, and this is a quote from the sources summarizing Durham, essentially no investigative activities happening for months, critical months leading right up to the 2016 election.
So let me make sure I understand the picture being painted here. Candidate Trump gets the full investigative treatment, maybe skipping procedural steps based on shaky info. Candidate Clinton's investigation gets stalled, maybe deliberately, by bureaucratic hurdles.
That is precisely the argument presented in the sources, drawing directly from the Durham report's findings.
And Durham himself noted this difference.
Explicitly, yes. The report highlighted this disparate treatment. And for those supporting Comey's indictment, this is Exhibit A, It reinforces their view that the FBI leadership clearly had, as Durham put it, a rather clear predisposition to go after Trump, while giving Clinton a pass during that critical election window.
Okay, so that really sets the political context for why this indictment is seen by many as necessary accountability, not just a legal matter. All right, let's shift gears slightly to maybe the most structurally explosive part of this whole story. Because it's not just that Comey was indicted, but how it happened. Critics are sounding the alarm, right?
They are, loudly.
They argue this indictment smashes the norms of DOJ independence, mainly because President Trump had been very publicly calling for Comey and others to be prosecuted. He even tweeted, "Justice must be served now," in all caps.
That public pressure from a president regarding a specific prosecution target is highly unusual, historically speaking.
But wait, let's pause on the mechanism here. Forget the politics for a second and just look at the process described in the sources. It sounds pretty extraordinary.
It really is something.
According to material, President Trump reportedly pushed out the U.S. Attorney Eric Siebert, who had looked at the case and decided not to bring charges against Comey.
Correct. Siebert declined to prosecute.
And then Trump installed his own personal lawyer, Lindsay Halligan, someone with apparently zero prosecutorial experience specifically to, quote, finish the job.
Yes, that sequence of events, removing a prosecutor who declined the case and replacing them with a personal lawyer to ensure the indictment, is what critics point to as, well, almost unprecedented in modern times.
It seems like a direct line from political will to legal outcome, bypassing traditional checks.
That's exactly the criticism. It signals a potential breakdown of the firewall that's supposed to exist between the White House and specific criminal investigations within the DOJ. Traditionally, presidents avoid interfering so directly.
So why isn't everyone condemning this? How do supporters justify this move?
Well, Those on the right who support the indictment, according to the sources, largely shrug off these concerns about breaking norms.
They just dismiss it.
Their argument essentially is that the other side started it. They claim President Joe Biden had set a precedent by, in their view, allowing the prosecution of Trump and his allies.
Ah, so it's a sort of they did it first justification, tit for tat.
That's the framing. Trump himself voiced this, saying they weaponized the Justice Department like nobody in history. So in his view, and that of his supporters, his actions weren't an attack on norms, but a necessary countermeasure, a way to rebalance the scales.
Okay, and that leads us to the kind of political long game here. We heard the phrase first dominaire mentioned in the sources. What's that about?
Right. This Comey indictment isn't seen by many MAGA leaders as just a one-off thing. It's viewed as potentially the first domino to fall,
Meaning
meaning the start of a much broader campaign. A campaign of accountability, as they see it, targeting perceived political enemies, especially within the intelligence community and the previous administration's Justice Department.
so Comey might just be the beginning. Who else is potentially in the crosshairs according to the sources?
The sources mention other high-profile names are potentially under investigation. People like former CIA Director John Brennan, former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper. Even Hillary Clinton is sometimes mentioned in these discussions.
Wow. So the Comey indictment, especially how it was achieved through that direct political intervention and replacing the prosecutor, it signals a real deliberate strategy.
It certainly looks that way to many observers. It suggests an intent to use the legal system quite forcefully to settle scores and fundamentally change how power operates in Washington.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, the listener? This Comey indictment, it really forces us to confront a major shift, maybe even a breakdown, in how the Justice Department is supposed to operate, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Whether you view it as, a necessary step for accountability after the Durham findings, or as a dangerous abuse of presidential power, the way this indictment happened has definitely changed the game. And at the end of the day, the legal case itself boils down to that core question. Did James Comey knowingly lie under oath about okaying leaks, like Andrew McCabe claims?
That's what the trial will need to determine.
Or is this whole thing just purely political retaliation driven from the top? But whatever the verdict is, the process itself, the public pressure, replacing the prosecutor, that seems to have set a really significant and maybe worrying new precedent.
And the broader implications really echo some of the final thoughts in the Durham report itself. Durham warned that just writing new rules or doing more training at the FBI would be, in his word, fruitless.
Fruitless
Unless there's a genuine return, a renewed fidelity to those old core principles of the FBI, fidelity, bravery, and integrity. So here's something to think about as this case unfolds. If a court does find James Comey guilty of false statements under 18 U.S.C. 1001, what kind of precedent does that set?
Especially for leaks, right?
Exactly. Given that Washington, D.C., as the saying goes, has long floated on a rolling sea of leaks, does a conviction here raise the stakes for every single high-level official? Does it redraw the line between what's considered maybe acceptable political spin or leaking and what becomes provable criminal lies? Especially using the very law Comey himself used against others, it definitely puts a sharper edge on accountability.